So it's great to see everyone. Thank you for being here. Before I go into my opening statement, I just wanted to mention Dikembe Mutombo passing away today. I got a lot of beautiful memories about him. When he played for Georgetown, I played for Seton Hall. And then after I finished European career, I worked for the NBA league office and did a lot of Basketball Without Borders camps. He was a huge part of it, just globalization of the game. Worked for Houston Rockets when he played at the end of his career, and then working for Denver Nuggets organization, and he was huge part of that history, getting drafted by Denver. You know, his contributions to the, you know, to the game of basketball and to the league and to the continent of Africa will never be forgotten. So I just want to express my condolences to his family. So back to my opening statement. Earlier this offseason, we told you we were committed to making changes, both on and off the court, and we have. The results of last season were unsatisfactory, but they presented us with the opportunity to learn, pivot, and take necessary steps to reshape our team. We faced significant franchise-altering challenges in our initial plan, particularly with the injuries to key players. It's not an excuse, but a reality we had to deal with. We stayed patient, gave the group a chance, and now we know that changes we made were necessary. This is the start of reshaping our roster, our strategy, and how we move forward. This isn't finished product, and we're confident in the adjustment we've made and the direction we're heading. As we enter training camp, we're excited to have guys returning and to welcome new players into the fold. This evolution is fluid, but we're focused on building a team that plays faster, is more versatile. Our emphasis is on playing a fast-paced, tough, and energetic style that will showcase the talent we've invested in, particularly our youth, while still retaining key veteran leadership to guide them. This season marks a fresh chapter. How will this group come together? What will it take to define our style of play? These are the questions that will unfold as we learn how to play and win together during camp and early games. We're going to be learning a lot about how these pieces fit together, and that's an exciting prospect. Every player knows the responsibility they carry in shaping this team. We're here to win. Developing our players is crucial, but we won't sacrifice the integrity of the game just for the sake of development. There are fundamental habits and standards of play that needs to be upheld, and this group understands that. Billy will touch on this shortly. We're not where we want to be yet, but the direction remains clear. We are confident in the steps we're taking, and I'm looking forward to seeing what this team can achieve together. And now Billy and myself will take your questions.
Hi, Casey Johnson with Chicago Sports Network. This question's for both of you guys. Obviously, Zach LaVine's going to be the center of attention a lot this season. I know you have no worries about his professionalism, but first for Artūras, how do you vision his long-term fit with the organization? And for Billy, how do you kind of balance Zach's need to have touches with also developing so many of these young players in the roster?
Well, you know, last year has been tough for him, for organization, for the fans. He worked extremely hard to get back to be healthy again, and he's in great shape right now. And we're, you know, as an organization, we're looking forward to see him in training camp. And I'm sure he's here thinking how I can help this team and, you know, this organization to win games.
Yeah, I think just looking at the roster, we have a lot of guys, quite honestly, that need the ball in their hands and that are probably most effective, you know, when the ball's in their hands. So, you know, I think for us, was in a little bit of a similar situation in Oklahoma City with Schroeder and Chris Paul and Shea. Those guys were great to work with, and they all understood that there was a level of sacrifice that goes into it. Hopefully, Lonzo can continue to progress. You have Giddey, Kobe's a guy, Io, certainly Zach, but they're all going to have to sacrifice. We can't have one guy with the ball in their hands all the time, and we got to play in a way that showcases and plays to the strengths of all those guys.
Go ahead,
Julia Poe, Chicago Tribune. For both of you guys, just looking at Lonzo heading into training camp, how do you approach the next 2-3 weeks for him, and what are kind of the milestones that you're looking for him to hit in the next couple of weeks?
Well, we obviously talk about this a lot, and going into training camp, we're going to have to, bring him up slowly, and he's already played 5-on-5, but again, we haven't seen him go through training camp, so there's going to be a lot of learning experience during the training camp and how he can take loads and everyday practices, so we're going to take one step at a time.
Opening day, or is that still something that's up in the air?
I mean, that's the plan, because, our objective with training camp is to be ready for the first game of the season and use the training camp to build those guys up.
I have two questions. Joe Colley, Sun-Times. Question for each of you. Billy, first, with Zach, you went and visited him this summer. How important was that for you guys to get on the same page? And I know your stance had always been that you have a working relationship, but it definitely seems like things were strained, whether it was on his side or whatever. How important was that visit and that building that relationship back up to where you feel like it won't be a detriment going into this season and beyond, however long he's a Bull?
Yeah, I think, Joe, that every time that I've ever reached out to Zach, he's always been responsive, and it wasn't so much going to see Zach, but, seeing all those guys. I spent a few days in Vegas for Summer League, went to LA, I saw Zach, I saw Lonzo, I saw Dalen, I saw Io, I saw Kobe, I saw a lot of guys, but I've always appreciated my conversations with Zach just because they've always been open and honest. I think he's worked hard the relationship, so have I, for the time that we've been together. Quite honestly, I think at least seeing him in September, I feel like maybe the last 2 years, this is the best he's come in health-wise, and rightfully so with the injuries he's come off. But I think every year I've done that with Zach, where we've gone out, we've met, and we've talked, and he's always been great and receptive and open to whenever we've communicated. So I appreciate that part of it. And like I said, anything that he and I have ever talked about, like I'm sure there's times in games he doesn't agree with everything I do, or sometimes the decision he makes I don't agree with. That happens, but in terms of the communication part, it's been great. I know where his heart is at. I think he knows where my heart's at. But it was more really talking about, I think, this summer about, how we need to play and what we need to do going forward, and how obviously he plays a major part in that. But I felt like the conversations with him and all those guys this summer were great.
And then with Artūras, I know you talk about winning and how that's important, but at the same time, it hasn't happened. It hasn't happened with this group. Then you take away your best clutch guy, your best defender, arguably one of your better rebounders. How do you still sell the idea of winning when it's obvious you're trying to do this youth movement? You can't, there's not an NBA team that's pulled off both at once. It's almost like you have to pick a lane and you're not picking one.
Well, I think the ultimate goal is to win, right? I think, the process that we're going through right now, we just started, and it's not a final product. I think, coming into this training camp, there's a lot of players that are coming back from injuries. There's a lot of new faces. We have no idea how that's going to work. Josh Giddey still hasn't, played with these guys, and, we got, added Jalen Smith. And so there's a lot of questions coming into this training camp, and we're going to be going through it and learning about this group, how this, group can work together in this mix. And we'll take one game at a time. Because, the development is just not, not learning how to, dribble the ball, shoot, and all this stuff. The part of it is adversity, and also to teach those guys what it goes into winning. And, although we have a pretty young group, we got to, understand that for Kobe, it's like 6th year, right? For Io's 4th year, for Josh's 4th year, for Patrick is 5th year. So it's a pretty young group, but they are pretty experienced. So we're trying to see how this group is going to, play together. We are going to try to play faster and push the ball because, we do understand that, obviously by losing, DeMar and, AC, there's going to be a lot of players on this roster. They're going to take responsibilities and play the role that they've never done before. So, and, the shots that we're going to be hunting is basically rim shots and, open threes. And the only way you can do that if you're going to, play faster. Because every time you set against set defenses, it's very hard to score. So we're going to look for answers, and, training camp is going to be for that.
Drew Stevens with the Bigs. Artūras, how important is it to you that you keep your top 10 protected pick?
I mean, this is not our focus. I mean, the focus going into season is basically to define our style of play and to find our identity. What is our identity with this group? And the last thing that I'm trying to to think about is basically how do we, have a home court advantage playing in this building. Last year we had a losing record. So those kind of things that, I'm trying to focus on instead of, what's going to happen after the season.
Will Gottlieb, CHGO. Last year after the season, you said your goal was still to win a championship, add 10 wins to the record from last year. Obviously, with this group, it seems like maybe heading the opposite direction. But what is kind of like your plan to get yourself back to that point? Like, what are kind of the concrete steps that you are looking to take over X amount of years that are going to help you get back to that point?
Well, concrete steps has started to change. And go into the season right now, we have so many questions, in training camp, how this group is going to work together. And constantly being open to make adjustments, to make changes. And we in the stage that we have to find out a lot of things about this group. And, going into the season and training camp, those are the things that we're going to be looking for.
Cody Westerlund with 670 The Score. This is for Billy. Is the plan to start Kobe, Zach, and Josh Giddey together, or how do you just kind of view those three in relation to the starting lineup and fitting on the court at the same time?
Well, the unfortunate part is because of Josh's situation, right? We've had a lot of guys in here for most of September, right? He's the one guy that really hasn't been able to get out there with those guys. Clearly, he's going to be a major part to the team. I think what Artūras was talking about, even like the development piece, like there's a whole thing that goes into some of that, right? It's not only on the court, but it's also off the court too, and building habits that you want. Because if you're going to talk about winning, you've got to do things. Now, maybe in a particular night or situation, we may not be good enough to win, right? That could happen, but we got to at least establish that. So I think those guys establishing how to play with one another is going to be really important, So it's hard for me to sit here and say on opening night, this is who we're going to start when I haven't even seen these guys really play together, in particular Josh. And then hopefully Lonzo's coming back and will be able to at least contribute at some point, and we'll monitor and see how he goes. But I'm not opposed to playing quote-unquote 3-point guards or 3 guards together at all. I think it'd be very effective, provided those guys all understand what that entails. That was the one thing that was great having Chris Paul. He'd have no problem going off the ball and giving the ball to Dennis or giving it to Shea, and that's kind of the give and take that you've got to be able to do. So I definitely see situations, whether or not we start that way, of Josh and Kobe and Zach, or Josh, Kobe, and Io, any of those guys being out there together.
And then a quick follow-up to that. Defensively, how do you think that would play out? Like, can you survive defensively?
We're going to have some defensive challenges, there's no question, and I think we're going to have to really be a team that's collectively going to do it together, so to speak. I think you mentioned, Alex not being here as great as he was, and he started and came off the bench, but we're going to have to play 5 guys. We're going to have to do different things schematically. We're going to have to do different adjustments or changes, throughout the course of the game, changing coverages. We're going to have to provide help in certain situations if there's mismatches. Clearly, if you're playing 3 guards, somebody's going to be lining up potentially against a mismatch, and you got to find some areas that you can kind of cover for each other. So I've always been a big believer that defense is played with 5, and we're going to have to play with 5. There were situations, quite honestly, with Alex that you could throw him on a guy and you didn't need to bring any help. He could handle it. We may not be in that situation, but it doesn't mean we still can't work to be good collectively as a team.
Well, Cody took John Greenberg from The Athletic. Cody kind of took my question there about defense, but I really was curious just because I heard you on the radio, Billy, talking about how worried you were defensively, and not just with the 3-guard lineup, but just in general, because we're hearing a lot about shot profile and playing fast. But, when you guys talk about winning, how worried are you that defense is going to be the cause of losing most nights?
Well, the other thing, too, is there's a lot of things I think that are growth opportunities inside, right? So, to me personally, there's just an integrity to competition, right? Like, when you sit there and say development, we're just going a development route, and we're just going to put a bunch of young guys out there and let them play 35 minutes and see what happens. Sometimes that's not the best learning experience. Clearly, in between the lines, there's growth that takes place there. But there's also growth in terms of a guy like Matas, who's a 19-year-old kid, learning what a routine is, how to take care of his body, how to eat correctly. Like, those are all development pieces, too. It's not just in between the lines. And if you just throw somebody out there for 35 minutes and you don't teach them the things that they've got to do to build a routine, to build habits, to put them in a position to be successful, not only individually, but inside of a team, it becomes difficult, and is playing time important to a player's development? Absolutely. But there's a lot more that goes into it than just that, and I think a lot of it's outside the line. So, from a defensive standpoint, we're going to have to do it collectively, and when you talk about the winning component, yeah, we can play as fast as we want, but if we don't really defend well enough as a team, you can't be good. If you look at really good teams, they're always good, on both ends. That's the development part. The development part is guys understanding what are the things I have to do individually and collectively to put myself, in a position to win. I don't know what the season's going to look like after 82 games or where we'll end up or how we'll be, but I think there's an integrity to competing, and there's an integrity going out there every single day and doing your very, very best. And I think what Artūras is saying right now from the developmental piece, yeah, we want to develop all of our players, but it's not a situation where you're taking yourself back and saying, hey, let's just throw all these young guys out there, give them 35 minutes to see what happens. That doesn't work either, in my opinion. Like I said, playing time's important, but they also got to understand what are the things I've got to do to put myself in a position to be successful and our group to be successful. And listen, we're going to have some learning experiences, because one thing, that was a huge luxury for us is 2 of the last 3 years that DeMar was here, we were great in the last 5 minutes of games. So we could play really, really close for 43 minutes in the last 5 minutes. It may be a learning experience for a guy like Kobe and some of those young guys to be in those situations to learn, what it's like. Zach, obviously, throughout his career, being a guy that's been in the league for, so long, he's been in those situations, but some of these other guys are going to get thrown into those situations. And Vooch has been in those situations, but you're going to have some young, so it's going to be a learning curve. So there's a lot of things that go into that from both ends of the floor if you want to be good. And, we're going to have to try to establish those things. Now, that's the goal. Now, what the final product looks like, but that's what we're trying to move towards.
Ryan Baker from CBS Chicago for Arturo or Billy. How big was or critical was the leadership growth with your younger players, with Io and Kobe, organizing that mini camp in Miami during the DNC and running that? And how are you looking for that to pay dividends as the season gets going, with them elevating not just on the court but in the locker room?
Well, I think that, Patrick's going into his 5th year. Kobe's going into his 6th. Io's going into his 4th. These guys are not players that have been in the league for 1 or 2 years. So this is another developmental piece, of how can they become and take more of a leadership role and a responsibility role. Like, I thought one of the things my first year here with Larry Marketing and Wendell Carter and even Kobe, they were so young and so much was asked of them leadership-wise that they just were not, they were trying to find their own way. But I do think some of our guys that are kind of moving into the middle parts of their career, that's another, that's development to me. I thought Kobe, and it was probably well documented last year, started to utilize his voice a lot more, and he needs to continue to do that, as does Io and Patrick and Vooch and Zach, who are veteran guys. But that's also a huge developmental piece that when I first got here, Kobe was not even in a position to do that. And he's in a much, much better position because of the work that he's put in towards that.
I mean, to follow up is basically this summer was again, growth experience for them, and the next step that they took, they started to work out together. And that's the only way if you're gonna invest in relationships and you're gonna invest into each other, this is the next step for this group, I think.
Artūras, you said that keeping the top 10 pick is not an organizational focus, but it obviously would help your kind of next roster iteration here to keep that pick. So have there been any conversations organizationally about reducing the role of guys, established players like Zach LaVine and Nikola Vucevic, and more dramatically, not bringing them off the bench, Billy? I mean, you said you haven't decided to start in lineup. Have there been any organizational conversations along those lines?
Casey, there's a lot of conversations, obviously, but what we decided to do is basically look at this training camp and what we can see with this group in training camp and take one game at a time and to see this group's growth and their roles and their rotations. We don't even know in terms of rotations or roles each going to play. So there's a lot of things to find out about this team. And, down the line, those are the thoughts that we're going to be, looking into.
Artūras, Billy, Josh Hicks, Honor Daily News. When it comes to Kobe White, he obviously made a strong case last year for Most Improved Player of the Year. Talk from an on-the-court perspective, what are expectations that you have of him, especially since now that he is in that fourth, fifth year, sixth-year role where he has more of a role offensively in that starting point guard position?
Well, in my mind, he was Most Improved Player in the league last year. He took a huge jump. And, and again, his growth is basically his voice is getting better, his leadership. And he's going to be in situations this year that he's going to have to take more responsibility, and we'll see him grow this year. That's all I'm looking forward to.
Yeah, I think the one thing for me with Kobe that I always enjoy is he always finds things to learn. And I think one of the things he learned last year that he was not didn't have the endurance to handle the load. And I think that was a lot of his summer was spent doing that, and we talk about the development piece. Like, that's a development piece for him that he probably didn't have to deal with the first few years of his career. Now, all of a sudden, he understands the stamina, endurance that he has to have as a player. And generally, when Kobe puts his mind to something, he generally gets better at it. But I know that was a major focus for him this summer.
Artūras, I kind of know how this is going to be answered, but I have to ask it anyway. With Zach, how important is it as an organization and you specifically to continue to try and shop him? And has there been a discussion with him or his representation that, hey, we're going to try getting you to a place that benefits you, or it's important for us to get you somewhere by this date or by this date? I mean, is it that in sync that you guys are looking to move him, or is there a scenario where you've told Zach, be ready to stay here?
We're looking, like I said, he's never been, last 2 years has never been in position to be as healthy as he is right now coming into training camp, and I expect him to be ready to contribute to this team. We as an organization going to be open to anything comes our way, but Zach is part of this team, and I'm looking forward to seeing him in training camp. The last game he played is the month of January, so he's looking forward. We're looking forward to see him in training camp. And
him in February, though.
Joe.
Gotta ask. I mean, he's been a rumor for 2 years.
Well, he's a big part of this team. He's going to have to fit in, with our plans and the way we want to play. And he's, as far as I know, he's looking forward to that as well. So.
Do you anticipate getting a contract extension done with Josh before the season starts?
I mean, we're probably going to have a conversations, you know. So we'll see what happens.
And then second, is Patrick Williams 100% healthy and ready to go?
He's ready to go. He's been playing 5-on-5. Again, you know, we'll use this training camp to, you know, to bring him up, you know, slowly. We haven't seen him again play in the game for quite some time, so he's gonna, you know, he's gonna be in drills. He's gonna be in contact. He's gonna play 5-on-5, and we'll see where he's gonna play. So.
Now, Mayberry, The Athletic. Billy, you had a shakeup on your staff. What does that mean? What can that mean for a team? And specifically about Dan Craig and Wes Unseld Jr., what do they bring?
Yeah, no, I appreciated, you know, the staff's work last year. A lot of great guys. You know, certainly Wes got a chance to know him a little bit just for his time in Washington, you know, head coaches meetings, those kind of things. I give him a hard time because I was in training camp with the Wizards, and his dad was the coach. So I got tortured pretty good at Bowie College. But great guy, obviously a wealth of experience. Artūras knew him very, very well for his time in Denver, and he got a chance to spend some time with him this summer. I think he'll be terrific. You know, Dan Craig was a part of Miami Heat for a long, long time, and then obviously with the Clippers as well. So I think fresh new voices, fresh new ideas. You know, it's been wonderful working with those two guys, you know, throughout the summer and moving into training camp. Thank you.